They gave me some ashes. I don't know if they were his ashes or not.
There's a difference between donation and body snatching.
Governor, do the former president's legal issues disqualify him to run for president? You don't think they disqualify him? No answer to that?
President Herzog is really a great person, and I look forward to welcome him here. I wouldn't feel the same way about the Prime Minister.
On the matter of the U.S. soldier, you said that the U.S. is working to resolve this matter. Can you just clarify what a resolution is?
Well, I mean, resolve this incident, resolve this matter to get to the bottom of exactly what happened. There is an investigation that's currently occurring.
Hello, I'm Nancy Cordes in Washington on a busy day. Welcome to America Decides. We're going to begin with some big developments in the investigations into former President Trump. Mr. Trump says he received a target letter related to the January 6th investigation. That could mean charges are on the way. Plus, what we learned at a hearing today related to his handling of classified documents. In a post on Truth Social Tuesday, Trump said he was given 4 days to report to the grand jury that has been investigating attempts to interfere with the peaceful transfer of power after the 2020 election. The former president criticized the inquiry on social media, describing it as, quote, political weaponization. For more on this, CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa joins us now. Robert, thanks for being here on such a hectic day for you. So we don't have the indictment. We don't have a target letter. But what are your sources telling you about what former President Trump could be facing here?
What we're looking at is a special counsel who's moving aggressively, knowing that if he wants to have a trial on a federal level about some kind of conspiracy that took place in the aftermath of the 2020 election, he probably needs to move more than a year before the 2024 presidential election, because Trump, of course, is already a federal candidate. The challenge for the special counsel is that what he's doing, based on our reporting, is talking to so many witnesses across so many fronts. There were different pressure points Trump had. His own vice president, he wanted him to walk away from the lectern on January 6th. He wanted state officials who were just learning today in Michigan. There's a new indictment there on a state level of 16 people who were trying to be so-called fake electors. And there are so many things that were happening behind the scenes: pressure on DOJ, pressure on activists, pressure on conservative media personalities, pressure on members of Congress on Capitol Hill, all to try to keep Trump in power under the illusion of election fraud, false claims of election fraud. This is very important right now for the special counsel, because if he's going to indict Trump for a crime, it will likely be, based on our reporting, knowingly moving forward with a scheme to stay in power, even though he was told repeatedly that doing so would be fraudulent, that by saying the election was rigged would be a false statement. And it's illegal in this country to commit fraud against the United States.
So potentially very wide-ranging charges, very serious charges. You know, you've now had the opportunity multiple times to talk to sources in the Trump camp on the eve of a letter like this or the possibility of an indictment. What's your sense about how they are reacting to this situation? Is it any different from, the way that they've portrayed their outlook in the past?
Not politically. In fact, politically, the whisper behind the scenes is that this could help Trump in terms of consolidating his support. But when you nudge them, his longtime allies behind the scenes, they acknowledge this is a legal variable. It's also a political variable. When you face a federal indictment, it hasn't happened yet, but it's potentially on the horizon here. Who knows what's going to happen? And that's not just going to complicate your schedule. It could complicate your life in terms of trial dates, in terms of possible imprisonment if convicted. And so Trump, in a way, he sees this as a way to get to the grievance of his base right now and rally them. But at the same time, he faces 4 indictments now. You already have New York. You have the classified records on the federal level. Looming is an indictment on the federal level for January 6th. And Georgia could be coming in the next few weeks as well.
And, of course, a looming trial in Florida where there was a pretrial hearing today having to do with his handling of classified documents. What did we learn in that pretrial hearing?
We learned that Judge Eileen Cannon is continuing to move forward. There's a lot of discussion about access to documents and who's going to have classified records access as part of the legal team for Trump. That took a lot of time. That's still moving forward. We haven't gotten full visibility into what Judge Cannon's going to do in terms of the full schedule of everything, but we're learning a bit more day by day. She is a Trump appointee. And this is a very serious case. Trump, as we were down there, he faces federal indictment for his handling of classified materials. A lot of time, if you just take one classified document out of a trove at the Justice Department or the Pentagon, you'll go to prison for a long time. So we're in a very fluid political moment and a fluid legal moment. And
the open question is whether she'll decide to hold this trial next year in an election year.
The Trump people are really hoping she pushes it till after the 2024 election. But Jack Smith, the special counsel who was spotted going to Subway sandwiches today, he's not saying much to the press, but his actions speak. This is someone who really is a prosecutor who doesn't want to have a public fight, but privately, behind the scenes, legally, is as aggressive as anyone I've ever seen in terms of holding Trump accountable. We'll see how it all plays out. But for now, really moving forward at a fast clip to send a target letter. I don't care if you're a former president or anyone, you never want to receive a target letter from the Justice Department. That's bad news.
No, you don't. And usually when they say they're going to get one of those letters, it happens sooner rather than later. Bob Costa, thank you so much for bringing us the latest details. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is reacting to that target letter sent to former President Trump in the January 6th case. In an interview with CNN, he said the country is, quote, going down the road of criminalizing political differences.
I don't want to look back. I do not want to see him. I hope he doesn't get charged. I don't think it'll be good for the country. But at the same time, I've got to focus on looking forward, and that's what we're going to do.
CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins us now from South Carolina, where he is covering DeSantis. Ed, good to see you.
Nancy, good to see you.
So Governor DeSantis, he was asked about that target letter earlier today and then again by CNN. What did he have to say about Trump's actions on January 6th?
You know, it was important that we ask him again because this is a candidate who has really tried to avoid any direct criticism of the former president in this regard. He had, at some point a few weeks ago, had suggested, well, you know, I wasn't in Washington on January 6th, so I don't really have much of an opinion on it. The answer changed today, just a little while after the former president announced that he'd received that target letter. Take a listen.
I think it was shown how he was in the White House and didn't do anything while things were going on. He should have come out more forcefully, of course that. But to try to criminalize that, that's a different issue entirely.
Governor, do the former president's legal issues disqualify him to run for president? You don't think they disqualify him? No answer to that? So he went a little farther by suggesting now it was wrong, maybe not criminal activity, but notice that when we try to press him on where some of his other GOP opponents, like Asa Hutchinson, have gone, saying that it should be a disqualifying factor and something that should remove him from the race, the governor, at least so far, isn't willing to go there, Nancy.
Right. That was definitely the gentlest criticism possible of the frontrunner in this race, and really just tells you so much about how unusual this race is, that the number two has a clear shot at number one and decides not to take it. Okay. On another note, DeSantis, you know, the reason you're there in South Carolina is because he just filed for the South Carolina primary. What did he have to tell you about his chances in that primary and his place in this race right now?
You know, and that's part of why we came, because in essence, it was a symbolic move by him today. He's the first Republican contender to file for the South Carolina primary before the state's former governor, Nikki Haley, who's also in this race, before the state's junior senator, Tim Scott, who's also in the race. He showed up, cut the $50,000 filing check, and put himself on the ballot. And then, given the concerns about his fundraising, the cutting of his staff, the fact that he's mired there in second place and has seen his numbers slip, we inquired, are you in this for the long haul? Take a look.
Governor, can you assure your supporters here in South Carolina you'll still be on the ballot, you'll still be on the mix when the primary is held?
I know that's wishful thinking for you guys in your industry to think somehow that we won't, but of course we will be. It'll be a really important affair here. I don't think that you will have very many candidates by then, but we will certainly be one of them.
Not necessarily wishful thinking. It's just merely a reflection of the fact that there have been candidates like him before who come out with a big head of steam, are able to raise a big amount of money, but then burned through that money rather quickly. Let's think of Scott Walker a few years back, Tim Pawlenty as well, two Midwestern governors who were seen as potential presidential nominees, got in the race, got a lot of great press, started hot, but then burned out because they spent through their money too quickly. Kamala Harris arguably had the same problem during the 2020 cycle on the Democratic side, never made it to the primary. So that's why we ask. But he makes the point. If you look at what we raised within just our campaign, if you look at what Donald Trump raised within just his campaign, not his super PAC, not any other associated fund, we're on par, if not a little better. Same with the president on the Democratic side. His campaign raised the high tens of millions of dollars. Overall, though, with the way Democrats can raise money, they raised $72 million. So his point is, I'm doing just fine in terms of money right now, certainly compared to others in this race. And yes, they'll be here to go to distance. But what today's announcement by the former president really did do, Nancy, and maybe this is why the former president announced it the way he did this morning, around the same time that Governor DeSantis was signing that paperwork, is it once again snatched the headlines from the Florida governor and anyone else and immediately turned all the attention back on the former president, who, as we've documented, often then sees a rise in the polls when he faces legal issues.
Well, a lot to talk about with both the front runner and the number 2 in the Republican primary today. And Ed is on top of all of it. Ed O'Keefe, thank you. Several Trump loyalists on Capitol Hill have already defended the former president in response to today's news. Nebraska Republican Congressman Don Bacon has at times been a Trump critic. So we're going to hear his reaction next. You're streaming America Decides.
If it's important to our nation,
I wonder how you think about where America is at this moment.
it's on Face the Nation.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
I always tell people that Twitter would not be Twitter without Black Twitter. It's just us being in fellowship with each other.
And it becomes a conversation you don't want to be left out of.
People really started to recognize the power of activism on Twitter.
Based on that one tweet, the hashtag #OscarSoWhite was trending around the world.
If anything has really powered Black Twitter, it's been humor.
If your food ain't right, oh, we're going to tell you about that, too.
We tend to create change, create culture and cool.
That's how movements happen on Black Twitter and go beyond more than that.
Black Twitter, the Twitterverse that changed a generation. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
the threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bringing virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Let's bring in our partners at the Weather Channel.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battering rams.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
Feel the forecast, streaming on CBS News.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
The carnage in our nation's schools has become painfully repetitive.
Now one more child!
School shootings have parents fighting mad.
I promised my daughter I was going to fight. It's going to keep on happening.
And teachers taking lessons in how to fight back.
This is an exercise.
We approach it as it's you or them.
It shouldn't have to be your teacher's job to protect your life.
But will the battle over gun control,
people are afraid that they're going to lose their gun rights altogether,
be the hardest lesson of all?
The exercise, you're having to shoot at an adult. Are you prepared to have to kill one of your students?
Guns in the Classroom, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She's the most successful alpine skier, male or female, ever, and a worldwide inspiration.
We need a lot of women doing sports really, really well.
The story of Michaela Schifrin's game-changing reign at the top of the slopes when we go person to person.
Welcome back to America Decides. Reaction from Capitol Hill is pouring in following Donald Trump's social media post saying that he's been informed by special counsel Jack Smith that he is a target of the investigation into efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Nebraska Republican Congressman Don Bacon joins us now. Congressman, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Nancy. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So I have to start by asking you about the big news of the day, and that's Donald Trump announcing that he's facing another possible indictment, this time related to his efforts to overturn the election, allegedly. So what's your reaction? And do you think that this should disqualify him in his bid for president?
First of all, I think the charge is serious. Any charge from a federal court like this is serious. Secondly, our elections are precious, and we have to protect them. We work hard during an election to win, and I'm a believer after 4 elections, and more than that if you count primaries, that you win gracefully. And if you lose, you try to do so gracefully as well. And the courts weighed in at every step, and so we have to protect our elections. And finally, I would say let's let the rule of law decide here. We believe in the rule of law, so let the prosecutor make his case. We'll let the defendant, the president, make his case, and then we'll determine if the election, whether or not he should run or not, and make that judgment based on the verdict. In this case, both sides get to make their case, and I'm willing to listen.
I want to play for you what House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said about this. He has a very different take, and I want to get your reaction.
I think the American public is tired of this. They want to see equal justice, and the idea that they utilize this to go after those who politically disagree with them is wrong.
Congressman, should he be taking this approach, writing off charges and potential charges against the former president as simply the weaponization of government?
Well, I would say there are differences of opinion. I do believe these charges are serious. I'll say that right up front. I know many of my colleagues see some disparities, whether, it's some of the previous cases with secrets in a garage, secrets in apartments versus the president being charged. I would also say 2 wrongs don't make a right, and all these cases are different. So I wouldn't say that I share the speaker's opinion on this. I would like the prosecutor to make his case, and then the president gets to defend, and we'll go from there.
Let's talk about defense spending. You sit on the House Armed Services Committee. Defense spending normally a given, but last week it barely passed in the House after your party attached some amendments having to do with abortion and transgender care in the military. Did those amendments belong on that bill? And will you vote for the bill if the Senate strips the amendments out?
Well, your second question, yes. This is going to look like 2019 when the Democrats controlled the House and the Republicans controlled the Senate. The Democrats put in a lot of their favorite bills, and it was a very partisan vote. The Senate stripped it out, and then it was passed in a very bipartisan way. I think this will roughly turn out the same way. We passed what I would consider a very Republican-oriented bill, pro-life, and a lot of these various factors. I would point out, though, Nancy, that about 9 or 10 amendments were also defeated by Republicans and Democrats as well. So there was some bipartisan elements in what we passed. But the Senate will, is controlled by Democrats. They will strip out some of this, maybe much of it. I don't know how much. And it will come back. Well, we'll be doing a reconciliation bill. And I very much assure you and the American people that whatever we reconcile with the Republican House and Republican Senate, it will be passed overwhelmingly by the House.
Well, those are encouraging words. Right now, Alabama Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville is blocking dozens of military promotions over abortion. Do you see his moves as a threat to military readiness? That's how the White House described it today.
If this goes on for a long time, it does have impact. But there's 2 sides of the story, Nancy. On one, the secretary was warned, and I know this firsthand, that if he made these decisions, there was going to be a lot of pushback from Republicans, though we didn't know it would be from Senator Tuberville. We knew it would come from somewhere, because in many states, this is the #1 issue, the pro-life issue. And so he unilaterally did this against recommendations from leadership on the Republican side. I do think there's an opportunity for these 2 to sit down, shut the door, and there are compromises that can be had that can be a win-win situation. I believe in a democracy and a representative government that we have with a bicameral separation of powers. You can't just do things unilaterally. You got to sit in a room and find an area that both sides can agree to. I personally think Senator Tuberville and Secretary Austin could sit in this room and find an agreement where Secretary Austin gets somewhat of what he wants, but Senator Tuberville also protects the taxpayers' money.
You know, you've talked a lot about civility in Congress, civility in government. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is a candidate for president on the Democratic side, he's been invited to testify to Congress about censorship on Thursday. Now, this is somebody who has spread conspiracy theories about COVID, about various vaccines, about Ukraine building bioweapons. Is this somebody who should be testifying before Congress about anything?
Well, I disagree with Mr. Kennedy's comments, whether it was the COVID and how it was selectively engineered to protect the Jewish people. I think that can easily be twisted into some of the old Jewish anti-Semitism tropes that we've seen in the past. I'm a supporter of Ukraine. I think it's in our national security interest. But I also know that it's all right to get differing opinions, and there's more cost if we shut people off in our system of government because people will feel like they're being discriminated against or not given a voice. So I disagree with Mr. Kennedy, though I don't want to prohibit him from having a voice because I think the cost of doing so is even greater. We just got to be clear when we disagree and say why. That's part of freedom of speech and our freedom to debate these key issues.
Interesting. Congressman Don Bacon, it's always so interesting
Thank you.
to talk to you and get your perspective. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A U.S. soldier is detained in North Korea after walking across the border into the country. What the White House is saying about this bizarre developing story next. You're streaming America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, and fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She dazzled on the court and off the court as a businesswoman.
Thank you for joining us on Person to Person. Tennis superstar and entrepreneur Serena Williams.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
I asked my students, what are we going to do about racism in the United States?
The backlash over teaching about racism in American schools.
I don't think it has any place in the classroom.
We can either pretend and say, no, we're not racist and we're all great people, or we can actually start to do the really, really hard work of addressing it.
How did you lose your job? I made the statement that white privilege is a fact.
Is it helping diversity and inclusion?
When you bring in different people's stories and experience, it enriches education.
If you don't talk about something, it doesn't go away.
Or driving us further apart?
What schools are doing to our children in the name of anti-racism is in fact teaching them racism.
The intention is to put us in this war against each other.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another. Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Welcome back to America Decides. A U.S. soldier is being detained in North Korea after he crossed, quote, willfully and without authorization into the country from South Korea. Officials say he crossed over the military demarcation line during a tour. The soldier had been released from military detention and was being escorted out of South Korea. The United Nations command says it's working to, quote, resolve the incident. For more, CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joins us now. Hi, Weijia.
Hi, Nancy. So the White House is talking about how closely they are working with several agencies to try to get to the bottom of what happened. That includes, as you mentioned, the State Department, the United Nations, Department of Defense, to try to understand what transpired. But also, as you mentioned, they do say that this soldier, who U.S. officials tell CBS News was Private Second Class Travis King, crossed over willfully. And so there are a lot of questions, Nancy, about, his thinking, about why he did it, what he was hoping to gain out of this. But the White House press secretary says that they are working to resolve this matter. And so I asked for some clarification about what that meant.
On the matter of the U.S. soldier, you said that the U.S. is working to resolve this matter. Can you just clarify what a resolution is?
Well, I mean, resolve this incident, resolve this matter to get to the bottom of exactly what happened. There is an investigation that's currently occurring. There has been outreach from the Department of Defense, right, as I mentioned, to their counterparts over at the Korean People's Army. You have the State Department, you have the Department of Defense, you have the UN and the White House all working together to resolve this. Resolving this is basically getting to the bottom of exactly what happened, and that is important for us to know.
And so, Nancy, I followed up by asking, is a resolution bringing this soldier back to the U.S.? And she said they were focused right now on ascertaining his well-being, that there are still a lot of questions about this. And I also asked whether they are working under the assumption that this soldier wants to come home, or whether they know that for certain. And because this is so early on in the process, Nancy, she didn't have answers there.
So many weird things about this situation, Weijia. For example, how did this soldier end up hooking up with a tour of the DMZ in the first place when he was supposed to be being escorted out of the country? But obviously, we're waiting for more details on that. So I want to switch gears with you in the meantime and talk about the other big story of the day at the White House, which was the visit to the White House by Israeli President Isaac Herzog. He met with President Biden in the Oval Office. Obviously, there was a lot of drama surrounding this meeting because of who was not sitting there in the Oval Office with President Biden, which is Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who until yesterday hadn't been invited to the U.S. to meet with the president. What can you tell us about what came out of that meeting?
You're right, Nancy. This was a really delicate dance of diplomacy for President Biden, because on the one hand, he wanted to stress the, quote, ironclad, unbreakable bond between the U.S. and Israel. On the other, there has been mounting tensions between these two countries because of Prime Minister Netanyahu's policy proposals to essentially limit the amount of checks that on the executive power by reforming its judicial system. And the president, Biden, has been very critical of this. And as a result, back in March, he said he had no plans in the near term to meet with Netanyahu. Well, on the eve of this meeting with President Herzog, President Biden had a phone call with Netanyahu and invited him to the U.S. for a meeting, although it's important to note that the time and the location has not been confirmed. Netanyahu claims that this meeting is going to happen here at the White House, which, of course, offers significant political a significant political standing for any world leader. But the White House and President Biden is not confirming, Nancy, that it's actually happening here. So, you can read into that what you will. But so far, the White House says, that is not, that we shouldn't be reading into that. But it's very normal, as you know, when the president invites a world leader to have a bilateral meeting here. And so the fact that it's not happening may be a nod to the fact that there are still some tensions between the two countries.
Right. What most observers would read into that situation is the fact that the White House is probably going to be watching how the prime minister conducts his affairs over the next few months before deciding whether he's going to be invited to the White House itself or not. Weijia Jiang, thank you so much. Well, that does it for today. You can stream America Decides Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News. Have a good one.
It's a history-making meeting. 4 extraordinary women who are all 4-star generals and admirals.
How did you deal with being discriminated against? I just worked harder.
The future of an ever-evolving U.S. military when we go person to person.